welcome to the show where we share the stories of the many who intersect with our healthcare system but are rarely heard from. My name is Kevin Poe, founder and editor of Kevin MD. Today in the show, we have Stephanie Moss. She is a medical student, and she wrote the Kevin MD article requesting disabilities accommodations in medical school. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we'll get into the article in a little bit, but first off, can you share your story and journey to where you are today?
Of course. So like you said, I am a medical student. I'm currently a third-year medical student at Rush Medical College in Chicago, and I'm currently taking a leave of absence from medical school after having a challenge passing my Step 1 exam. Originally, I'm from Boulder, Colorado. I went to University of Colorado in Boulder, degree in psychology, minoring in leadership and dance.
And tell me, in terms of your medical school journey, has it been what you expected?
It definitely has not. It's interesting because my husband and I actually went to medical school together. So I've been very thankful that he and I were able to push through together, go to the same medical school. And it's been very interesting. I'm very glad for his support for going in, but it's been really interesting to see how each of us reacts to stress of medical school in a different way. And I think what has really kind of taking us by surprise is really how mental and physical illnesses can affect students, not just me, but multiple medical students that I know, that we're constantly, it was constantly hidden. We didn't feel comfortable to express our medical challenges that we dealt with, and didn't really see it as impacting our academics because we got to medical school somehow. And it was interesting how then seeing how the new level of graduate college really started to impact our grades, and taking a look back and seeing what really is going on. It's not just intelligence, there might be more that's having an impact.
All right. You could be sharing a little bit more about what you're talking about in your Kevin MD article. It's titled Requesting Disabilities Accommodations in Medical School. Now, for those who didn't get a chance to read your article, can you just walk my audience through it and share the story of why you decided to write it?
I'm going to take a step back 6 to 8 months ago when this all happened. Just like all second-year medical students, I went into our dedicated study period, and right away, I started noticing that something was off. I was struggling for the first time, to just do studying 24/7, not have a job or any requirements. And I took a practice test after practice test, and I just wasn't getting a passing score. I had tutors and mentors and all that, and test after test, I just couldn't get a passing score. And so thankfully, my school allowed me to push my exam back an additional month. So I started M3 year just like my classmates, but there was a 4-week period where people could take electives, and I took that additional 4 weeks to continue to study, and I just still couldn't pass the exam. And my school gave me an option of take the exam and risk failing, or taking the year off. So I decided to take a year off. About a couple months later, I went in for the exam after I'd been scoring what I thought I needed to score, and I failed it by 1 point. At that time, scoring was 194, and I got a 193. And that was so detrimental and painful for me. And I didn't know what to do at that point. And thankfully, I had another friend who had gone to the disability office, and I was so surprised because I had never really thought of myself as having a disability, especially in a disability that I was aware was maybe dyslexia, ADHD I'd heard of, or we also like to think of disabilities as being in a wheelchair, something like that. And after I made that decision to go to disabilities office, everything just came in place. The disabilities office talked to me, and I guess I didn't disclose before. I found in medical school I suffer from endometriosis, infertility, anxiety, and a lot of these health conditions that I didn't know before until I went to medical school. And now I finally have a support that's saying, hey, maybe your struggle with academics, the struggle with STEP is not, it's not your intelligence, which is unfortunately what I was constantly thinking. That imposter syndrome hit really, but then suddenly the disabilities office is saying, no, we can help you. And so the letter that I wrote for Kevin MD is actually a segment of the request for disabilities that I sent to the USMLE to request for additional time for breaks. And I had that approved, and it was such a challenge to be able to get to that point. And I wish so much that someone would have told me that I qualify for disabilities, not just at the beginning of med school, years before. Through writing this article, I started to recognize different patterns that I had noticed all the way from elementary school, that I had struggled with exams. So that is what my article is writing, is how important it is for, if students feel like they're struggling constantly with exams, even though they're doing everything, why not go to the disabilities office? Like, it doesn't hurt. They will be honest with you and say, no, sorry, that's not a disability. Or you might be surprised and you might receive support that might change the outcome of your entire medical career.
So tell me the process and what the disabilities office did for you when you first visited them.
Yeah. The first visit, I met with Marie, who's the director, and we just sat down virtually on Zoom. And I just told her a little bit my story of what I had struggled with, getting my diagnosis, struggle during the school year, going to mental health appointments, physical health appointments, in addition to studying, having pain all the time. And I just told her what was happening, not expecting anything. And she talked to me a little bit about other students and other current physicians and residents that she had worked with, not just at our institution, but across the country, and that I was not alone. And that was so meaningful to know that it wasn't just me. I wasn't making up these illnesses. These were real issues, in the fact that they were affecting me. And then the process from there, she requested that I get letters from my physicians. So I got a letter from a surgeon, from my surgeon who diagnosed me with endometriosis, from my therapist that treated me for anxiety, from the medical school, primary care doc, so different physicians. And I compiled that to send to her. And then she also asked me for this letter, where I sat down over a couple of weeks and just explored my journey.
And what kind of accommodations did the disability office offer you?
Yeah, so I got approved for extra time in exams and extra break time when I'm actually go back for medical school for any additional tests, exams. So not step 2, because that is through USMLE. So the board exams that are the mini ones that we take at the end of each clerkship, that will be at the school. So that is addition. But specifically for my step 1 USMLE, I just requested for time for additional break times, because what happened during the first exam, I noticed that my anxiety was so high because I have to go to the restroom about every hour. And since the block in STEP is just 40 questions, 1 hour, that's enough, but I just need a little bit more extra time to maybe take medications, take breaths, more than's provided. And then when I go into my clerkship, we'll be requesting additional disabilities of, like, when I scrub in, I can only be scrubbed in for an hour and a half and go to the restroom or take a medicine and scrub back in, things like that. Or in my primary care clerkship, that I need a chair. I just can't stand for long periods of time. So similar things like that.
So in medical school in general, there's always stigma that anything outside of the norm, whether it's behavioral health issues, it's really kept quiet. Now, what has been your experience? How accepting in general has the community been when you talk openly about the disability?
That's a really good question. And it's a huge mix. I would say older physicians, older generations have been very difficult. They're not direct to my face, but when I tell them, it's just like, oh, and then you can tell that there's there's some negative energy that's going on there. But my similar classmates have been amazing. They've been reaching out to me like, oh, I have this illness. Do you think this would be a combination? Hey, I take this medication, or what do you recommend? Who should I talk to? So I think my own classmate, my generation is so open. They want to talk about it. And so I'm very excited for our generation of physicians who recognizes that mental health is an issue and that we're not superheroes. We're not physicians, nurse practitioners. They're not this magical beings that don't have illnesses. We're humans. And just because we have a mental or physical illness doesn't mean we can't be a medical professional and help others.
Now, as you reflected on this, you mentioned that you may have had some of these symptoms really early on in your education journey.
Mm-hmm.
Now that you've reflected on it, is there anything that you would have done differently during your medical school journey?
I would have wished that I would have gone to disabilities from day one, especially one. Well, I came into medical school not knowing I suffered from anxiety. Unfortunately, I did not have the best health insurance. None of my family members are a part of medicine or have anything to do. And I also suffer from a very common trauma history. So I just didn't have access to that. So I myself didn't know nor accept that I was allowed to seek help. And so that definitely had a huge impact on not being able to myself get support earlier.
We're talking to Stephanie Moss. She's a medical student and she wrote the Kevin MD article requesting disabilities accommodation in medical school. Stephanie, what kind of advice can you give to other medical students who may be undergoing disabilities or a similar story to yourself?
I think what's so important is that each individual know that they're unique and that's okay. That's why you've been accepted into medical school. Medical school committee, there are thousands of individuals who apply. There's a reason they picked you. It's because you're unique and that's okay. And you should be proud of your uniqueness. And if that means that you need to go to therapy, you need to go to doctor's appointments, that's okay. And it is in your right to have those appointments and receive those additional support. That means that also can include when there is exams coming up and you struggle to just be calm, you struggle to answer it in the amount of time. It's okay to ask for more time. It's okay to ask that you get more time for step one if the adequate time of studying isn't enough. And I think that's so important to know that you're not alone and there are so many individuals out there that are willing to help you.
So it sounds like your community at Rush has been tremendously accommodating, and this looks like a positive result from this. Just from what you know, responses to your Kevin MD article, has your experience been reflective of other medical institutions across the country? Have you heard any other stories from other students similar to yourselves that may have had a different experience?
I'm glad you asked that because that is the really sad thing is this is not universal. Our school, because of our amazing disabilities office, has been really focused on advocacy. But like I said, it is so new and a lot of medical schools and undergraduate schools have a long way to go. I received a lot of feedback from individuals all over, both in the graduate and undergraduate realm, and saying that, oh, my school says that my disability counts, or my medical problem isn't severe enough to receive accommodations. And even in my own school, I've had individuals that have constantly received struggles, even getting support. So I can appreciate that this is just the beginning. And the first thing is just to know that the resource exists.
And my final question, what are some of your take-home messages that you want to leave with the Kevin MD audience?
I think the biggest thing that I would like individuals to take away is that chronic mental and physical illnesses are disabilities. It doesn't have to look like a physical disability of needing a wheelchair or not being able to hear or see. These illnesses can have a significant impact on your academics and life. And so it's important to first identify and that you do have an illness and that it is a disability and that you deserve to receive accommodations. You deserve, it is part of your right to at least ask for help. And a lot of individuals, including myself, that was such a hard thing, especially when you have a history of some sort of trauma. Those the idea of asking for help is really hard because you feel like you don't deserve it, that you're special for even being accepted into medical school somehow. But we have to let that imposter syndrome be quiet for a little bit and advocate for ourselves, just like we advocate for our future patients.
Stephanie, thank you so much for sharing your time and insight. Thanks again for being on the
Thank
show.
you. Thank you so much.